And I'm being joined by Reuben Johnson, military expert, correspondent for Breaking News. Sir, good evening. Delighted to have you.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Delighted to have you with us. What are the key takeaways from this visit? Because there's a lot of noise, right, in the media space. But I wonder, what are some of the key takeaways from your perspective?
Okay. First of all, this visit cements Russia and China's status as Russia's greatest partner, and the two are now, if not declared, they are basically allies. Now, China's been supporting Russia in the war against Ukraine for some time, but what is different now about the level of support is that China is basically all in with a number of very, very important technology imports that Russia cannot receive from any place else now due to sanctions. But the other thing it cements Russia's status now as the junior partner in the China-Russia alliance. 30 years ago, Russia was on top. Russia was selling and providing everything that China needed to build a modern military. And today, China is providing inputs to Russia so that Russia can keep building tanks, aircraft, missiles, and so on. And Russia becomes increasingly the less important of the two partners.
Right, but this no limits partnership, it sort of perhaps seemed to be an exaggeration because, I mean, according to the Atlantic Council, Chinese exports to Russia have declined in recent months, although, of course, they're still happening. So I was wondering if perhaps China, took to heart what some of the Western leaders were trying to convey and is trying to perhaps limit their involvement in the whole matter.
Please understand this. China does not care what Western countries think about their support of Russia. If there is a drop in the overall dollar value of imports to Russia that China is exporting to Russia, that's not the significant point. The significant point is what's being imported into Russia from China. China now provides 90% of all the microchips and other electronic components that Russia needs for military production, components that they used to buy the equivalent of from Western countries. Without China, they wouldn't be able to build a thing. China supplies 70% of all the precision machine tools used in the Russian defense sector. And China provides 100% basically of the ball bearings that are used in production of main battle tanks, other armored vehicles, rail cars. So China is an absolutely critical, now a critical aspect of Russia's military production. So I've seen no evidence that China is at all afraid today. People are in certain parts of the elite in China, but the government in China now could care less what Western countries think about them or threaten them with.
Right, but according to some analysts, let me quote you, Michael Schumann. He says that the problem is that Xi is exchanging ties to a $25 trillion economy, and of course he means the US, for a $2 trillion economy. That's not much more than a gas station. So, I mean, do you think that Xi Jinping's anti-American stance, or perhaps, his feelings are sort of clouding his judgment when it comes to economy? Because, of course, it would be more beneficial for China to be closer with the West, right?
That's not what these leaders care about. What Xi cares about is breaking the international rules-based order that has functioned since the end of the Second World War. They see that as dominated by Western countries. They see that as dictated by Western countries. And they want to break the Western countries' grip on being able to define how nations are supposed to behave and interact with one another. And that's more important than any actual dollar figures. That's the goal, that China and Russia and their allies become a dominant force in the world, and they can do what they want. And the Western world won't have really any ability to affect their behavior.
Right. I mean, we do see these deepening divisions, of course, both Russian and Chinese interest in the global south. But do you think there's something that could become a bone of contention that could actually lead to Russia and China sort of going different ways? What could be that kind of issue?
Well, the only thing that I can see at present are some territorial issues potentially, but you have to remember that this current dynamic between Russia and China is one in which they are, as I said, they're successfully overturning the West's influence in different parts of the world, but they're also building partnerships in areas like defense industrial production, like in energy, and Russia right now is always signing, or has been for the last year and a half. They have been signing agreements with China on the sale of LNG, on the sale of just regular gas, on the sale of all energy products. They've been signing deals with China that before the war would have been unthinkable because they are on such terms that are so unfavorable to Russia. So the Russians essentially don't have much leverage.
Right, that's true. I mean, also it's the same case with India, right, with Russian oil going to India. But I've also read that by some, China is regarded as the axis of sanctions evasion because, well, they're trading with Russia in yuan and ruble, so they can sort of evade some of the Western sanctions. But also countries such as Iran are being mentioned in this sort of network. How do you view this?
This sanction evasion game has been going on for a long time, and the Chinese are masters at it. This is how they've continued to do business with Iran. This is how they've continued to prop up North Korea. And unfortunately, the Russians and the Chinese never forgot about what they did to evade sanctions during the Cold War era and what they did to evade Western restrictions on exports of technology from the West. They never forgot how to do that. In the United States and other countries, we've forgotten all about the enforcement regimes we created during the Cold War. We don't even know what they were. So they're at a tremendous advantage vis-a-vis the West. And I don't see that we can do much to change that unless we're really willing to sanction China very, very, very hard in such a way that would cause them to stop supporting Russia to the level that they are now.
Right. I mean, the Russian-Chinese narrative towards the U.S. Also accuses the United States of sort of building weapons for potential decapitation strikes. Yet China is a place which has these FOBs systems. You're a military expert, so could you perhaps shed more light on this and, whether they're sort of trying to project what they're doing themselves, I mean, the arms race, on the states?
Yes, they're trying to project what they do onto other people. This is what the Russians always do. They have practiced decapitation exercises. As a matter of fact, that's what they wanted to do in Ukraine. They wanted to kill President Zelensky and the key members of his team and take over the country that way. The Chinese also rehearse decapitation exercises all the time with regard to Taiwan, with regard to mass demonstrations in places like Hong Kong. And they don't make any apologies for any of this because the Russians and the Chinese are the same. They're always victims. They're never perpetrators. They've never done anything wrong. Only wrong things have been done to them. So anything that they want to do, no matter what it is, they're defending themselves.
Right. And there's this summit, right, happening in Switzerland in June, centered on Ukraine. Russia, of course, is not going to be attending. China did not give an answer yet, from what I gathered. And apparently, the Russian president is very much against his Chinese counterpart going there. And I wanted to ask you why and what does it, how much does it have to do with the global south, which would, of course, perhaps, follow Chinese leadership, right?
Well, first answer your first question. If you're asking why Putin would be against the Chinese participating in this summit, Putin doesn't want anything discussed with regards to a peace deal with Ukraine unless he's involved. If he's not involved, he feels like he's being marginalized. The global south is an issue, but you have to remember that the global south depends on Ukraine to an extreme. I mean, it's something like over 40% of the grain that goes into the UN World Food Program, which benefits the locals, the global south. That grain comes from Ukraine. They were the largest donator of grain, or not donator, but the largest supplier of grain to the UN World Food Program. So, I'm sorry to say, I don't see what can come out of a peace deal which is somehow being negotiated or organized by China. What's China's moral authority? They have over 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps. What's their moral authority? I don't see it.
Right. I was thinking that perhaps if China goes one direction, the countries which are dependent on China would probably also support whatever decision, right, or whatever proposal they are in favor of. But
I doubt that. But go ahead. Sorry.
Right. Let me just ask you one last question, a military question, right? Because here I'm certainly not an expert. So are we expecting any new weapons to enter the battlefield? Perhaps, the Chinese have something in their arsenal that Russians could use in Ukraine soon or at some point?
If we're talking about a major weapons platform, no. If we're talking about potential for Chinese missiles, perhaps to be launched by Russian platforms, yes. But we're not going to see any magic Chinese fighter airplanes. The Russians have their own next generation fighter. We're not going to see. I can't see any major platforms, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right. So what shall we sort of keep an eye on? What changes on the ground this meeting could translate into in the near future? Or is it just for show? Was it just sort of, window dressing and so on?
You're referring to the Chinese providing weaponry to Russia. But the big thing the Chinese have been providing is munitions. It's artillery rounds. Same with the South Koreans and some ballistic missiles that have been provided. It's ammunition of all sizes and calibers. The Russians can't make enough. No one can make enough. They can't make enough ammunition. There's not enough gunpowder in the world. There's not enough nitrocellulose to make enough gunpowder. There's a shortage of everything.
Right, that's definitely a problem with Ukraine, right? I mean, even if the money is there, it's difficult to purchase additional munitions. Thank you so much, for being with us. Reuben Johnson, military expert.